Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and welcome to creating some vintage cards easily with card kit components using the May 2025 card kit called Beautiful and Curious. I am using mostly components from the kit today with one of my favorite stamp die combos from Simon Says Stamp, the Ornate frames, just to dress it up a little bit. In fact, I'm using everything from the May kit except for, I think, the cardstock and envelope. However, I would totally use one of the envelopes with this card. So let's just say I didn't use the cardstock for these 3 cards, but I know I will be using it for other cards created with this kit. Card kits are a fantastic way to make the most of your supplies and also limit the supplies that you're using, making it very economical and also kind of limiting the choices. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I can get overwhelmed, so limiting my choices is always really one of those things I look for to be able to bang out a bunch of cards quickly and easily. I'm starting with some of the Holtz Wallflower 8x8 paper included in the kit. I did end up trimming it down just a little bit to fit in my die cut machine and in my MISTI a little bit better. And then I did take one of the Ornate frames, die cut the largest frame from the paper, and I'm going to be stamping this beautiful scallop design on the cardstock itself using the black soot Archival ink included in the kit. Really, you guys, when I say I use the kit, I used the kit. So all I'm doing is lining up my paper, lining up my stamp. And the reason I did it this way is because this stamp has a tendency to like to be a little wonky. And I didn't want it to go wonky and then waste my paper. I don't want to waste a bit of this beautiful Holtz Wallflower paper included in the kit. Once I have my stamp lined up, I'm going to go ahead and ink it up with the black soot Archival ink and stamp it right on the panel. What I love about this is I am a huge pattern paper fan. I love pattern paper, but sometimes I think it can be a little intimidating to use. If you just kind of take the idea of it being a pattern paper out of your mind a little bit, and granted, I am using more of the subtle tone-on-tones. Usually I kind of call that, or it is called, the B side of pattern paper. It's the side that maybe isn't quite as busy. I feel like it's a little bit maybe more usable. So we're dressing it up. Frames and adding a frame instantly adds interest. I'm going to go ahead and do that for a couple more patterns in the kit. We're also going to utilize another one of the frames from the Ornate frames. Now we're going with the Beautiful and Curious 6x8 stamp set included in your May kit this month. Something I love about this stamp set and something I love in general is I love distressy type of stamps. So the kind of, ripped up, torn up postage, little snippets of text. You guys know I love my text stamps. I am here for all of that. So you'll notice that on each of my stamped panels, we're going to have some little distressy text. We're going to have some postage stamps. We're going to have some ink splatters, all of that good stuff. I'm leaving my Ornate frame there as a guide. It's kind of showing me where do I not want to stamp. I don't want to completely cover things up. I want it peeking out from the side. I'm also using sentiments from the Beautiful and Curious set also as a guide to know where I want to stamp things. I don't want to stamp my text or write over an ink splatter or anything in that like that. So I'm going to add a couple of splatters here and there, just kind of extend my little postage splatter, and that's all going to be peeking out from this other frame. Once I'm happy with that, we are going to utilize my very favorite, you guys aren't even going to be surprised about this, we're going to utilize my very favorite pattern paper from the kit, the all over text print. It is a very, very usable paper if you want to stamp over it. So we are going to be using that for the smaller frame. Now, do you see here, I am just placing another die cut pattern paper right into that first negative space that we did for the first card, instead of, swapping them out, which you could, but I already know that this is lined up perfectly. So I have left it in my MISTI and I am just swapping out the pattern papers that I'm putting in here and adding the scallop frame to the other two card panels that I want to use. And this bird background is actually going to be portrait instead of landscape. I know I talk about this a lot in my videos, but I really try to make the most of my crafting time and also make the most of the kit. While I have everything out, I can make multiple cards with the components from this kit, so I'm going to do that. And I love that black soot frame. So let's go ahead and distress these as well, being aware, making note that one of these is going to be portrait, not landscape, but otherwise really keeping the whole design the same. I just kind of wanted to change up what's going in the smaller frame, and that really dictated the orientation of my card. So we're just going to grab out, and you'll notice I am using acrylic blocks, which I hardly ever do, for all of my distress stamping. And you know what, you guys, with these small images, you really can get a good impression. I just make sure that I have it inked up really well. And then when I press it onto my paper, you'll notice I'm taking my index finger, kind of just pressing on my acrylic block to make sure that I'm getting nice, even pressure right there in the center to get that stamped image. Look how cute. And then of course my splatter is all going to be, a little different here and there, using my frame as a guide so that I know where I want to add some of those additional little ink splatters. Okay, I'm loving it. I think it looks fantastic. I have already trimmed down the transfer sheets. These are the Lucky Sentiment strips included in the kit. I've trimmed down what I'm going to use on each. You'll also notice that I took that text background print pattern paper from the kit and die cut my frames just like I did before. I'm actually not using the negative space for these, even though you totally could do what we did for the bigger panel. I find that this, worked fine and I didn't need to do that. And I'm using, again, my black soot ink. I'm using it throughout every single step of this project. In fact, I am not using another ink pad. I'm going to use the distress crayons, though, that you also get in your kit for adding a little bit of color to my cards. So we're going to get all three of these smaller frames stamped just like so. And then we are going to be adding some other images from the Beautiful and Curious stamp set right in the frame. Now this is where we're going to kind of change up, if you will, what is in each of the frames. And this is where the difference in the cards comes. So even though they're all the same, they definitely work together as a stamp or as a card set, pardon. You could make them all thank you cards or something if you're needing more of a thank you type of card. I like to maybe take my creative licensing with certain aspects, and this is where we're doing that. So on one of our card panels, we're stamping the large butterfly, and I purposely stamped it off of the edge, and I love how that looks. Then we're going to take the Stormy Sky and peeled paint distress crayons, and we're going to add a little bit of color. I'm starting with the background on this one, and to be fair, I started really light, and then kind of as I started working on these, I decided I could definitely use a heavier hand. But you're getting the distress crayons and you're getting this water detail brush in the kit. I love this water detail brush, you guys. It is one of my favorite products ever. I use it for all kinds of different coloring and blending and all of that good stuff. I love it. we're coloring right on the pattern paper. Now, I did put water in the pen and it was kind of coming out heavy. So you'll notice I'm taking a dry cloth. You can take a paper towel and you can sop up some of that color. I would recommend that just because this isn't a watercolor based paper, but you can still watercolor on it, I promise. Now I'm taking peeled paint and adding some color to my butterfly. And again, I'm going to take a dry area of my rag and I'm going to dab up some of that color and water so that it isn't quite so wet. Off camera, I did add a little additional color to that panel. And once I realized that it was going to work the way I had hoped it was going to work, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my remaining frames. Now, full disclosure, I know you're seeing that floral frame up there. I actually didn't love how that one worked out, so we are going to restamp that one. But I do love this little touch of like this tree and this bird for that bird background paper. We're going to, oh, and I accidentally used my peeled paint where I didn't want the peeled paint, and we're just going to leave it. We're going to go with it, friends. I'm going to go ahead and go over that with Stormy Sky. We're going to have to blend it out. And what I ended up doing for that corner is I really saturated it with water, and then I dabbed it up, saturated it with water, dabbed it up, just really trying to get rid of some of that green. I don't mind the green too much. And then I also pulled some of the green out into the rest of the blue sky on this particular frame. And that really kind of helped make it look more like it was on purpose and not an accident. I'm a big fan of, when you can, making it work. So here I'm just adding water, dabbing that away. Adding water, dabbing it away. And then we're going to go over it with our Stormy Sky. And it's still a little bit green. And that's okay. And we're just going to take our green, and you can see that I'm going to start pulling some of that out into the rest of this frame so that it looks more intentional. It's really a touch of color. We're not necessarily quote unquote coloring in the images for this. We're more just adding those little subtle, very muted, vintagey touches of color to our little framed pieces. Now, I'm also going to take the ice vellum, which I love, that is included in this kit. You're getting a half sheet, and using another one of the images from the Ornate Frames stamp set that I pulled from my stash, that is available from Simon Says Stamp, I'm going to stamp 2 of these arches for each card. So I'm going to need 6 total. I am using the Black Soot Archival ink to stamp on the vellum. Now, the Archival ink is going to be waterproof and dry on lots of different surfaces when it's heat set. I'm going to tell you guys, full disclosure, I did not heat this, but I did let it sit for like, I don't know, overnight. I worked on this card over a period of time. You could totally heat set it. You also could put like a clear embossing powder over the top and heat set it if you wanted to make it permanent quicker than waiting overnight like I did. That's just kind of how it worked out for me. And I was kind of at the end of a day, and so I stamped those, I let them sit, I came back the next day and die cut them. Okay, now I'm taking my backgrounds, and I was kind of prepping and pre-planning my greetings. I did end up using 2 of the different greetings from the Beautiful and Curious stamp set on these, and that's going to dictate the sentiment strips are going to dictate where I place my sentiment. We are using the Black Soot Archival ink to stamp our greetings for those as well. Again, I use Black Soot Archival ink for every step of the way on these cards, and we're just using the frame as a guide. So wherever our frame is, kind of that other half of the card design, whether it's landscape, whether it's portrait, is going to feature the greeting. So one side kind of has our cute little portrait photo, the other side has our sentiments. Right, we're going to go ahead and stamp up You Make My Heart Smile for this one. I mean, this alone, just with the little frame on it, would be darling. Oh, I love these so much. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to restamp that final frame. It took me a little bit to figure out what I wanted to use instead, and sometimes sleeping on it is the best thing. I actually ended up taking the small butterfly from the Beautiful and Curious stamp set, and we are going to stamp it 3 times. Instead of moving the stamp, you'll notice I am moving my paper up and down. I started in the center, and I am doing a trio of butterflies. You guys, this might be my favorite one. I thought the large butterfly was my favorite, but this might be my favorite. I love, love, love this. So after we have that stamped, I actually went opposite for this one. I stamped and then die cut. I am going to add my same Stormy Sky and peeled paint distress crayons to this one as well. Blue, the Stormy Sky around the edge, and then we'll use the peeled paint for the butterflies, just like we did before. And you'll notice I definitely used a much heavier hand when applying my distress crayon. Now that I had a good feel for how this was going to work on the pattern paper, I felt more comfortable going ahead and really applying a heavier layer, adding my water, and then as always, dabbing that water up. It also helps mute it just a little bit more. But again, I definitely don't want to leave that water sitting on pattern paper. I also did a much heavier application of my peeled paint for the butterflies. Going to add that color in. Look how amazing this looks over that text pattern paper. This is one of my favorite looks anyway, but oh my gosh, you guys, look at this. And then I'm using a dry part of my rag for each part of this and dabbing away the ink. It looks so good. Now that we have all of our pieces, I've die cut my arches, we are going to pull the whole thing together. Now, also included in the kit is this wonderful copper foil or transfer sheets. I'm going to grab my mink. I have this mink here, and we are going to go ahead and use this to foil the sentiments. You could also foil the whole sheet, the whole transfer sheet if you wanted to, that sentiment strip sheet. I actually trimmed mine out. A lot of times I do foil the whole thing, but I did trim them out this time. That way, if I want to foil some of the other greetings with a different color, I can. And I'm going to run those through my copper, and that is going to give us beautiful foiled greetings. Plus, in a little baggie in your kit, you do get some May Arts ivory twine. Now, we only get a little bit, and I did 3 cards, but lucky for me, I actually have a couple of spools of a couple of colors of May Arts twine that I purchased a long time ago. It lasts forever, so if you want to grab some from Simon Says Stamp. They are awesome and can be used all the time because we are going to use that ivory twine on all 3 cards. Once I've run my sentiment strips through my mink machine, oh, look at those beautiful foiled greetings. We're going to pop all of these out. And it is time to bring it all together and finish up our cards. All pattern paper, you guys. All pattern paper, stamping, and a few embellishments. How amazing is this? On the back of each of my frames, I am going to take the twine. This little piece is the piece you get in your kit. Also would be cute wrapped around, cardstock panels used on tags, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to just do a messy little design on the back of each and take my favorite Simon Says Stamp foam and place it over the back to hold it in place as well as pop it up. I love my foam for this. Now, I did notice after I started doing this, I was like, oh, it's not enough. I really needed I wanted about 3 loops on each. So I am going to use this, but I'm going to grab a little extra and kind of loop it around, and we're going to place that on the back. I find that using foam or some other adhesive to hold it in place rather than liquid, like I would say a tape runner or foam, makes it much, much easier. I'm just going to place that on the back, about 3 pieces, so it's nice and secure. This is also going to disguise any of those lumpy, bumpy kind of looks that this panel would have if you put the twine behind it and then just adhered it straight to the background panel. I usually prefer a little foam, and I love how that looks popped up. So we're going to go ahead now and glue our frame in place. And see how those little distressing pieces peek out from behind that ornate frame? Isn't that cute? Then on the short side of this frame, we are going to take our arches and glue those in place. These were stamped on that ice vellum, and I think you can hide your liquid glue kind of behind the stamped areas. And I'm going to simply place one at the top, one at the bottom. And then I did put an acrylic block on top to help hold those vellum pieces in place until the glue dries. I actually really love how this kind of draws your eye in and focuses the eye on this panel on each of the cards. It is completely optional. I think it would be cute without, but I already had the stamp set out and I was having so much fun making these cards. I loved how this looked. Then we're going to take my other favorite foam from Simon Says Stamp, these thin foam adhesive strips, place them back behind our foiled sentiment strips, and we're going to add these to each of the cards right underneath our stamped greeting. I think the fonts in the greetings from the Beautiful and Curious stamp set are gorgeous, and I always love a combination sentiment. Finally, from my stash, I did pull some of the gold Positively Dazzling gems, and we are going to add the small ones in the center of our arch at the top and the bottom. And we're also going to scatter a trio somewhere on our card. So I'm using just little dabs of glue. I'm using the embellishment wand from Simon Says Stamp to pick those up and pop those right in place. Oh my gosh, you guys, look how beautiful this card is. Isn't that just amazing? And all this paper, except for the vellum, is pattern paper. So now I'm laying it on a white side fold card base from Simon Says Stamp. I was trying to determine, do I need to put cardstock back behind? Do I need to add another piece of pattern paper? We're not really going to see that much of it. And I really thought the white of the card base tied in nicely to the sentiment strip. So I opted to just go with a standard either side fold or top fold card base from Simon Says Stamp. Let's go ahead and do our 2 remaining cards really quick. You can see now that I am using my spool of May Arts Ivory ribbon. I'm making several loops. We're just going to pop that onto the back of the frame, take our foam and glue that in place to make it nice and secure. And if you don't love how it looks, you can always kind of adjust. I'm adjusting as I go. Now, there is one thing I forgot to do that I ended up doing after I had put all 3 cards together. On my desk, I think it's out of the frame of what I'm working on, I have an acrylic block that has a teeny tiny little phrase on it, like just one of those little distressing phrases. I think it says part like 6. I had intended to stamp that with the Archival ink inside each of these frames just to kind of make it look, I don't know, more distressed to match the background, I suppose. I'm actually decided to go out on a limb and go and stamp it after I had adhered these to the cards, and it worked out fine. I figured worst case scenario, we could cover it up or I could stamp another one, but it worked out, and I do love that little bit of added distress. I'm using those acrylic blocks to hold my vellum down just like I did before. I did put the arches on the short side, no matter the orientation, whether it was portrait or landscape. I just felt like it looked nicer. I did try it at the top and the bottom of this frame and I didn't love it. So I did put it on the side, and I do love this. Oh my gosh, you guys, how cute. I love that the bird really matches the bird of the pattern paper on this one. And we're going to put this one on a top fold card base. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for my final card. Adding the twine, adding the foam, adhering everything, adding a few gems. And then I wanted to show you that little stamp, and I am taking it and I am just stamping somewhere along the frame edge on each one of these backgrounds. Oh my gosh, I love it. We'll glue this last one down to our card base, and then we will take an up close look at all 3 finished cards created with the May 2025 Beautiful and Curious card kit for Simon Says Stamp. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these vintage inspired cards using a card kit and card kit mostly kit components. The supplies I used to create these cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.